conversation on. So when you're starting out, whether you're a student or a young person in your career, the main goal is to get the interview and to land the job. So at this point, when you are going into the interview, we are here today to help provide you with some tips. And we have three great representatives from CVS Health, Hootsuite, as well as Vert Digital to give you a little feedback and help you along on your mock interview today. So what we're going to do first, we are going to allow the employers to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about what they do for their company. And we're going to start off with Charity. Charity from CVS Health. Are you on with us today?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Thank you so much. Well, I'm Charity Bowman with CVS. I have been with CVS 21 years next month. Out of those 21 years, 18 of those years I have spent in the talent acquisitions realm. So my background is business administration with a concentration on human resources. And what I tend to showcase the past 7 months, we've really been building a program around retail management internships and around store managers and training. So we really look to bring in talent and locate future store leaders. Before that, I really built the strategy around recruiting on our pharmacy side, which comes with pharmacy interns, pharmacists. That was the bulk of my career. So a lot of what I do in TA is about 30% recruiting. I build PowerPoints around interview tips, around what's the best to bring your best self to interviews. I've done a lot of public presentations across universities the past 18 years. So just to kind of tell you in a nutshell, I can bring a lot to y'all. If you have questions, anything today, ask away. I'm here to answer any questions that you have or anything to that degree. And a little personal note, I live in a little town called Kodak, Tennessee. Wow. So I tell people, they're like, where is that? And I say it is 10 miles from Dollywood. So that kind of tells you I'm closer to Pigeon Forge, and that's it. I'll let the next person go. Thank you, Sherry.
Okay, so today, guys, as you can see, we have an expert on the line. So Marcella from Hootsuite, introduce yourself to the group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marcella. Pronouns are she, her. I've been working with Hootsuite for just over a year, but in recruiting for almost 5. And at Hootsuite, I hire for anything that's non-tech across North America and Latin America. If you don't know what Hootsuite is, we are a social media management platform in the SaaS industry, which is software as a service. So if you want to get into tech or have any questions on how to get into it, I'm your girl.
Thank you, Marcella. And Debbie from Vert Digital. Welcome, Debbie.
Thank you. Hi, yes, my name is Debbie Aiken. I work for Vert Digital, a mid-sized marketing agency here in Atlanta. My main focus is recruitment and employee engagement. I'm the single HR person here at Vert, and I handle 100% of our phone interviews. So every person who interviews for a job for us talks to me first. And I also help manage our summer internship program, and we hire a good number of entry-level employees. So I'm excited to be here today.
Okay, great. So one thing I want to point out to our students, since we are in the pandemic era, a lot of things, what we do, we're working remote, and we are using virtual platforms. So on today, I would just suggest try turning on your cameras, engaging, smiling, typing questions in the chat. I'll open up a period where you can actually ask your question verbally, but let's try it out by turning on your cameras if you can, so the people here today can actually see you. Great. I see Asia, she popped on, so thank you. That's if you can. Get used to this virtual environment. That's what we're here for today, to help you manage and navigate your way through the virtual mock interview process, or either if you have a face-to-face. So we're going to jump right into it today. A lot of times when you start off with your face-to-face or either your virtual interview, one of the first questions that they're going to ask you, what can you tell us about yourself? So Charity, can you give us a couple of pointers on how the students should answer that question?
When I ask that question, I often ask, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and how what you can bring to the role you applied for? So I like them to tell me a little bit about themselves and then tell me why they applied for that position. So number one, when you go to talk about yourself, it's okay to add a little bit of a personal touch. Like, I like to read, I like to hike. It helps calm the nerves for yourself and then maybe make the interview more comfortable. I'm more of a casual interviewer, so I like to be conversational and go into it and learn a little bit about you. A lot of times through that conversation, you really end up answering probably 2 or 3 of my interview questions that go into it, if we can base it off of that. And then really do, when it comes with that question, tell us about yourself and why you apply for this role. Also make sure you do a little research on the company. Here lately, I've been interviewing students and they don't even know we're a Fortune 4 company. So really do your research and know the company that you're applying for. Do a Google search, 5 to 10 minutes. Be prepared for that interview, because it can go into, let me know a little bit about yourself, quickly into why did you apply? Very quick. It typically rolls that way. That's how it rolls with me at CVS. And then also always have like a little elevator speech ready as well. I always tell people practice your elevator speeches. And if you don't know what that is, I would Google. It's like 30 seconds, elevator speech, high level about yourself.
I have a follow-up to that, Charity. You mentioned that your style of interviewing is more conversational. What if the student or the person going into the interview is more extroverted, more conversational, but you find that the person that's interviewing you seems to be a little bit more stoic? Can you tell the students on how they can navigate their way through that opening question?
Typically with that, I tend to navigate them through that when I read the personality. That's why I like the fact that we're virtual, and I love the fact that you said cameras on, because I can read body language, because the majority of my interviews today post-COVID are virtual. They used to always be in person. So with that being said, I tend to navigate and get a pulse on that person. But typically, if that's how they interview, a lot of times I would say I'm more comfortable with asking the question and let me giving you an answer. They could have reasonable accommodations in place somewhere from a previous employee that we're not going to know through an interview process.
Mm-hmm.
But at CVS, if they have certain accommodations in place, they can actually request that as part of the interview process, and we can put different measurements in place to assist them as well. I know I'm kind of going a little everywhere with that question, but it was general. But I wanted to let you know at CVS, we have different processes in place to also help individuals if they feel like they may not understand the interview, if it, due to a disability or to that reference as well. But when they come across a little bit more stoic, I really just try to make them more comfortable. I think it's my responsibility to read them, not their responsibility to tell me.
Okay, that's great feedback. What about you, Marcella?
Sorry, I couldn't find my mouse there for a second. So we actually don't ask this question at Hootsuite. And the reason for that being is that it actually introduces bias into the interview process. And that's something that we really try to mitigate. So what we ask instead is, give me an overview of your background, or what got you interested in the role and what made you apply in the first place. So really, I think what's key when asked, as you will probably be interviewing for various places, when asked, tell me a little bit about yourself. Exactly, what the previous speaker mentioned was, have an elevator pitch, do your research, give a brief synopsis of your background, why you're invested in this role, and what you can add to the organization.
Great. That's great feedback. Debbie, do you have anything to add?
I agree. I think if they ask, tell me about yourself, starting with your experience and how it relates to the job is a great place to start. We also don't ask the tell me about yourself question. We usually say, tell me about your experience. So yeah, having a little speech there prepared, just kind of an overview, is always a good idea.
Okay. And still sticking with the virtual interview space, so many people have creative backgrounds, whether they want to have a dancing dog or just anything in the background. Tell us a little bit about what you would recommend, Marcella, as far as your background when doing a professional interview, even if it's a virtual screening.
Definitely. I think honestly, simplicity is key here. I think that it's amazing that everyone has, different backgrounds, different creativity, but at the same time, we're not trying to highlight your jumping dog or a video in the background. Instead, we're trying to highlight yourself, your skill sets, and what you bring to the table instead. So for me, my tip is simplicity is key, white background, or, at least a little bit of organization. And there's also great filters to choose from as well that are nice and simple and less distracting.
Okay. What about some of the students who may not be very well versed in the backgrounds and they're in their dorm room? What kind of tips would you give us, Marcella, or either Debbie, on how they can kind of clean up their space or whatever, if they're in their dorm room or either somewhere where they're very limited?
For sure. You can always put up a sheet on your wall that really helps, hanging from like a bunk bed or anything like that. I'm sure there's a blank white wall in your room as well that you can kind of, just sit in front of. You can even see from Debbie right there, she's got a great space, white and green, and nice and simple. I can't, CH Bowman also has a great background, really, neutral as well. But yeah, in, your dorm room or a space where you just can't clean up, I think a sheet in the background is really helpful. And also, most of these conferencing features also have those clear backgrounds as well that'll blur out anything in the background. So hopefully that'll help.
Okay. Debbie or Charity, you have anything else you want to add about the visuals, backgrounds during virtual interviewing?
I think she add a little bit in. Oh, go ahead, Debbie. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think she covered. I agree with Marcella.
I was going to say, when I think about interviews I've had over the past, just make sure if you have any animals or anything that they're not barking, there's no distractions.
Right.
I had an interview last week and the young lady was so sweet. She's like, there's this train you're going to hear at 12:15 that's going to go by and shake my apartment. And I just appreciated her being proactive and letting me know that certain things to that reference. So one time I was interviewing an individual and she had 5 cats and they all came up on the screen. She was petting them, wanting me to let them know their names right in the middle of the interview. That's just not appropriate during an interview. That's not a good first impression. So that's what I would say in reference to distractions in a background. I know we're all virtual, so a lot of backgrounds I tend to be fine with, but distractions is what can distract, could potentially hurt you in your future career.
Okay, great. That's great feedback. So within the virtual space, what if your interviewer is interviewing you with their camera off? How should you handle that? Marcella, I'll start with you.
I think that's tricky because sometimes I think a lot of times, especially if you are given a link for, video conferencing, if you're not sure if that interview is going to be video or audio only, it's always nice to send an email beforehand asking, will this be audio only or will this be a video interview? Then also how to prepare for that call as well. But if you show up and the interviewer has their camera off, feel comfortable to ask, would you prefer for me to keep the camera off, or are you comfortable with me, on, or are you comfortable with me turning it off? So just that little bit of communication to make sure that you're feeling comfortable as well, because it's also awkward to kind of stare at yourself throughout the entire interview. So
Right.
Just ask, and they'll be pretty flexible more often than not, or may not even notice that their camera's off. So feel comfortable in asking. You always have to remember that you're interviewing the organization as much as they're interviewing you as well.
So I have a follow-up to that. What if it's a virtual screening? It's not a formal interview. Should you still dress in professional attire even for your screening virtual interview? Charity?
Absolutely.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm so
No,
sorry. I
you're
think
fine.
that follow up to me. My apologies, Charity.
No, well, I was going to say yes. I think for anyone, for a first impression, you definitely dress in interview attire, especially, if you're going to be on camera. And even if you get an interview invite and it says phone screen, be prepared to even be on camera. They may say, hey, can you turn your camera
Exactly.
on? Always be prepared. Phone screen, interview, panel interview, whatever it is, always be prepared professionally.
That's correct. I remember during the pandemic, I had a phone screen and it was actually virtual. Thank God I was dressed for it, which it brings me to my next question. If I'm doing a virtual interview, should I get fully dressed from head to toe in professional interviewing attire, or I'm only waist up in pink fuzzy slippers or either Nike slides at the bottom? Anyone? Debbie, let's hear your take on it.
Sure. Yeah. I think I think waist up, I think is generally fine as long as there's not the opportunity that they're going to see you from the waist down. If you think your dog might distract you and you might have to get up to let your dog outside or something, then put on some reasonable pants. But I think people are pretty much used to people wearing sweatpants in virtual meetings. I would not be offended.
Okay. What about you, Marcella? What's your take on it?
Yeah, same thing as well. Waist up is totally fine. At the same time, though, I also know that a little bit of a placebo effect when I'm dressed up, when I'm feeling, that I'm looking my most professional and being able to present myself from, full body, then I feel more confident coming into an interview. So totally, a little mind game there as well, that I know when I'm fully, decked out, that I'm ready and more prepared to kill an interview. But yeah, if you're feeling confident from the waist up, that's okay too. Again, just making sure that you're not going to have, a viral moment where you stand up and everyone, sees those puppy print boxers or anything like that. But also take a look at the organization too. A lot of organizations are a little bit more casual, are, more of that, office casual environment. So they don't require for you to come in with a 3-piece suit or a dress or a blazer or anything like that. So do a little bit of research as well, because sometimes, just a nice collared shirt or a plain blouse works just as fine during an interview too.
I'm glad you brought that up, Marcella, because that was going to be my follow-up to you since you brought it up. What if you are interviewing with, say, a more fun environment, like your is it Zappas or Zappos or something like that, a marketing agency that's known to be a little leaning towards the very innovative side, very relaxed culture? Should you throw a little flair into your interview outfit, or should you just stick with the straight lace, blue, gray, brown, black? Give us your take on it.
This is a difficult question to answer, because the organization I work for is very different than a lot of organizations that people may be interviewing with. So I think a safe bet is always just kind of be, as neutral as possible in a space that you're comfortable in, that you're going to feel you're most confident in as well. Whether that is a 3-piece suit, or it is a nice blouse or a plain t-shirt, especially in an innovative space. Again, there is that opportunity for bias to come in when you're trying to mitigate that on both sides. So a difficult question, because I work in a very casual environment, but I think it's always best to come in presenting yourself in your best way. Neutrals are always helpful and less distracting, especially during a video call as well.
Okay, great. You're nodding your head, Debbie. Did you have anything to add?
Vert, the organization I work for, Vert, is a marketing agency, so very casual. Everybody wears jeans and t-shirts to the office on most days. And so for interviews, I think, something reasonable, business casual would be fine. If you showed up in a 3-piece suit, again, it's not a bad thing to be overdressed. But yeah, I would say shy away from t-shirts or sweatshirts or anything that looks casual. But as long as you look, reasonably presentable, then I think you'll be fine.
Okay.
At a casual workplace.
Exactly. So we're going to jump now into the actual process during an interview. Charity, can you give us a little feedback on how a student should handle silence during an interview? Say if the interviewer has already asked the question, the student has already answered and there's a long silence, whether they're taking notes or what have you. How should the student mitigate the silence to avoid nervousness?
In a situation like that, typically, as I told you, I'm a conversational interviewer and I'd give behavioral based questions. So with that being said, because I make all the hiring decisions for the people I hire, so I'm a hiring leader. So with that being said, typically I tell them at the beginning, I have like 2 screens. So I'm like, I'm listening to you and taking my notes on the other screen and that. So I typically prepare them and I tell them if there's a little bit of pause, I want to make sure I capture my notes due to the fair practice law, things to that reference. I explain it to them. And if there is silence, the only time I encounter silence is if I answer a question and they need time to think about it. And I give them that time. There's no pressure. And I always tell them at the beginning as well to if they don't understand a question I ask, I can reword it. Like I often ask a question, tell me about a time you had to think outside the box to complete a work project. That's one of my common questions. And I ask that sometimes they'll be like, well, I had to think outside the box when I worked at work and I was working with other people and we came up with an idea. So I had to come back with, explain to me what you did, explain to me that process. So usually there's not silence because unless they need time to think, I don't really have an awkward silence. I tend to bring them back in and calm the nerves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just about reading their behavior and reading their mannerisms. So I don't think I answered your question directly, but I hope I gave you a scenario to where what I run into when that happens.
Well, I think that you are a great interviewer. My background is corporate recruiting as well. But how should they mitigate if they don't get an interviewer like you that is telling them that I'm writing the notes? How should they calm their nerves? Because oftentimes at a trigger, we'll start talking again. And so how should they mitigate the silence and know that it's okay to wait for the interviewer to finish what they're doing and to ask another question or how should they mitigate themselves during the silence and not get nervous?
Typically, I give them that direction. I may not be the right person to ask this question because in my 18 years of interviewing, I've not encountered that. I think it's just a natural to me to come back to the person and give them the space to feel comfortable.
Okay.
So maybe Debbie or Marcella may be a little bit better if they've encountered that recently, but honestly, there's hardly ever any silence. My interviews are an hour to an hour and a half, and there's hardly ever any silence to that level with me. So it's not something I typically come into with in my realm.
Okay. What about you, Marcella or Debbie? Any feedback?
Debbie, you want to take it? Go for it. Okay. So, I actually agree with Charity. Like, I haven't had any kind of like awkward silences or, where you maybe, I guess I'm the interviewer, so it shouldn't be awkward on my side. But I think it's important to remember as a candidate that silence is powerful and that can be used on both sides. So like Charity mentioned, sometimes you need to take a moment to gather your thoughts, think about the question. That silence is powerful to make sure that you are giving the best answer and giving your best self. And sometimes silence, again, just means on our side that we're just typing away, making sure that we're recording your answers. And so I completely understand both sides. And I think it's just important to remember silence is powerful. It's okay. And it's okay. Just take that moment where they're typing away to take that extra breath and gather your thoughts again. It's a difficult question to answer only because I guess the awkwardness isn't on my side. It may be on an interviewer. So hopefully you just kind of take that power in the silence and take an opportunity for yourself.
So I'll take that time to follow up with you again. Some interview questions can really stump you. Any tips on responding to a question that a candidate may be struggling to answer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I always like to give the example of a speaker like Barack Obama. He is very slow and yet deliberate in his answers. He'll pause and take a moment. And like I mentioned, there's power in silence. If you need to take a moment to think about an answer, that's okay. It doesn't mean that you don't know what the answer is. Sometimes you just have to gather your thoughts. And like Charity mentioned as well, it's okay to ask, to re-ask a question, reword it as well. And if you don't know an answer or are just stumped, you can always ask to get it reworded or ask to come back to that question afterwards as you feel a little bit more comfortable throughout the interview process, or just get that idea back in your head throughout the process as well. So it's okay to be stumped. It's okay to take a moment and breathe, and it's okay to slow your answers down a little bit, as it's nerve-wracking. And sometimes you just need to check what I like to say, your flow, which is internally and externally, how you're speaking and how you're breathing. So that moment is powerful. Like I said, silence is powerful, and you can use that to your advantage throughout the interview as well.
Great, great. Charity, I want to pose this question with you because you have a breadth of information and you've been in the field a long time. Can you explain to our students what the STAR interview process is like?
We haven't used the STAR interview process in a while, so let me see if I can. It's been a few years for us over here.
Okay.
I don't know if I can explain that. We went away from that process about 7 years ago.
Okay, well, I see you guys are very innovative because a lot of employers are
yeah,
using
we are
it.
extremely innovative. We go to more of a conversational approach. We do the behavioral base, and we base it on the fair practice laws to make sure that every candidate I interview for that requisition, for that job posting, is afforded the same interview. So the same questions go across all the candidates. So we don't use the STAR here. Maybe Marcella and Debbie do. Maybe they can. I appreciate you saying based on my experience, but we don't use that platform.
Either one of you guys can take it, but if not, I can take it because I do know that a lot of companies, organizations, employers are still using it. The STAR interview is situation, task, answer, response. What was your answer? What was your action? So they're asking you a situational question. And so you have to come back and give the situation, the task that you were tasked with, your action, or either your response. And I know some companies are moving away from that, but oftentimes the interviewer will come back with so many follow-up questions that will sometimes stump the candidate that's actually asking the question. So just kind of practice over in your head give me a time when you had to work in a team, on a team project, and one particular person was not pulling their weight on the project. How did you actually handle it? So that's when you can go through the STAR in order to give the response. So when you start thinking more about situational and behavior questions ahead of time, that'll help you to kind of calm your nerves going into the interview, because a lot of times they want to see if you're a critical and logical thinker, can think on your feet, and that will give them an indication how quickly you can approach a particular problem without getting stomped or flustered or what have you. So that's just my 2 cents on today.
Oh, Sherry, that was very good, and that is a lot of. We don't reference it as STAR at CVS. We reference behavioral based questions, which they are what I typically ask. Like, can you tell me about a time you had to accomplish a goal with a group? And then I say, what was your role in the group? What was your outcome? So therefore, I'm trying to gauge if they have leadership skills, because what their role was in the group. And then secondly, I'm trying to take away, to your point, are they agile? Are they quick on their feet? Do they work well under pressure? Is there flexibility built into that? So yes, typically our questions do come around that, but come more conversational. And to your point, it does trigger more questions based on their response. For me to come back and say, well, this was that. So how did you handle this? Or how did you handle that customer interaction when they tell me they had an irate customer and they're giving me that? Sometimes I dig a lot deeper if it's a really good example they're providing me with.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. I'll let Debbie take this one. Let me see if I can pull it back up. I think they said, do you have any tips on effective communication for an interview? So Debbie, I know you said you do a lot of phone screens. So it's like you are front line of defense. Do you have any tips on effective communication, which was one of my questions that I was going to ask you guys? How can you avoid the and the trying to fill in the gap when you're communicating with your interviewer on your panel?
Sure, I would say try to be concise in your answers. It's better to take a second to think about your answer and then deliver it concisely instead of just talking and kind of rambling on. I would rather just wait for you to kind of pull your thoughts together. And see, I just said, so people say those things. That's okay. If you find yourself saying it a lot, and I think it's okay for you to just acknowledge it and say, gosh, I really need to work on not saying so often. I think that's okay. But yeah, I think the best plan is to take a second to think about the question and form your answer before you start talking.
What about you, Marcella?
Yeah, I would say exactly that. And also coming into an interview, it's totally okay for you to come in with a notebook, whether that is virtual or in person, and having bullet points on your information, your background, your responsibilities, your skill set, things you want to talk about. It's okay to read off of that during an interview and, go back to it during that call as well. It's totally okay. This is about you. We want to make sure you're able to do the role, or that you have those skill sets and ability to be trained to do the role. And so I always tell people, do a little bit of research, look up, most popular interview questions. How are you going to answer those? Have little bullet points for each answer. And, if you have that kind of cheat sheet on your own experience, that's totally okay. I probably won't even be able to tell. And that's going to help you feel more confident throughout that conversation to have more conversational interviews like Charity's, or have more structured interviews when you know what you want to share and what you want to highlight on your experience, which will hopefully mitigate the ums and uhs. And like I just did an there, now that I'm conscientious of that. But again, silence is powerful, so it's always okay to take that moment for yourself as well.
Okay, I have another question in the chat for anyone on the panel that can answer. What do you say to this response? Why should we hire you for this role? Can you give us a few tips on how the students should answer this question? Charity?
I ask that question often, and the tips I can give to that is really be genuine. And this is your time to shine. This is your time to tell me what you're passionate about this role, for you to tell me why you stand out amongst other candidates I have interviewed. It's mainly why we ask this question, because I'm personally trying to gauge your energy. I'm trying to see what you're passionate about. And this is where you get another moment of an elevator speech, like, why should I hire you? So one of my favorite answers is, I'm passionate about retail management. I can bring my customer service experience from Ulta over to you, and I can elevate my skill set. Something to that. It's kind of like your sales pitch. You're trying to get my buy-in. With that being said, there's your moment to shine.
Okay, that's a great answer. I'll pose this question to Marcella, since she works at Hootsuite. I'm not sure if she's on the more technical side of it, but I think you mentioned non-technical. We have a question from Michelle. She says, any advice that if you had for a job opportunity that require you to make a video for the application? So if you have to make a video for the application and submit it, any advice on what probably should be included in the video?
Definitely. So I think that elevator pitch is really important. Talking about how, like, your background, what makes you passionate about the role, what makes you passionate about that, that particular organization as well. We don't do video interviews at Hootsuite, or like a video submission at Hootsuite. But I have done video submissions as well for, application processes. And I think it's okay to almost even write out your own plot and storyline exactly of how you want that video submission to look like. And it's okay to do 100 takes as well. But I think it really comes down to elevator pitch why you're the right fit and why you're passionate about this opportunity and why you're passionate about that organization and how your experience is going to tie in to solve, fill the role that they are looking for and help their organization get to the next level.
I think that's a great response. That's a great answer. Another question from the chat. When you are asked about your work experience, would you just mention experiences that are relevant to your field or all of your experiences? Take it away, Debbie. I see you nodding.
Yes, I think this is a great question because this is a really good opportunity for you to talk about all of your experience. I would say if you've got experience in things that are even not related to the role, I think it's okay to mention it because it's part of your development as a professional. So you might not think, maybe you have a part-time job in customer service or something that you don't think is relevant to what you're applying to, but it helps you gain some of those soft skills. So I think you could, if you've got, a number of jobs in your work history, I think it's okay for you to, I think it's a great idea to run through them and say, when I worked at this job, I gained customer service skills. When I worked at this job, it helped me learn how to work with difficult people. At this job, I had a challenging relationship with my manager. So even if it's not, the work itself isn't relevant to the job you're applying for, I think you learn something in every position, and it's a good idea to talk about those things.
And you're correct. And that's what we deem transferable skills or your soft skills that can translate over to just about any job. Just like what you said, your customer service skills. You have your hard skills, your very technical skills, but some transferable skills you can take with you from job to job. So let's refer back
Terry.
to the category. Oh, you go ahead,
I was going to ask you, I wanted to just add something to that. What I really like to hear is when students say, I was in ROTC in high school or freshman in college, or I was an Eagle Scout or things like that, because it shows, community service, volunteer, anything
Exactly.
like that to bring into it. It shows discipline. It shows time
Correct.
management.
Mm-hmm.
It shows that they can manage things outside of their job as well. So I really like to hear about anything that showcases outside of a working realm too, that I can bring into it. So I wanted to add that little tidbit.
And that's a great tidbit. So I'll refer back to you on this one, Charity. We have a question also in the chat. As an international student, during interviews, there are questions on whether we require visa sponsorship. How can you respectfully communicate that my goal is to intern and gain experience while I'm in school?
Okay, for the answer to that question from CVS standpoint, it depends on the position at CVS if we sponsor H-1B visa or TNs. So with that being said, we ask that on the application. So we do not ask that during an interview. It's considered biased. We cannot ask that question. So with that comes through, it's asked on the application. So if they apply to a job position where we will sponsor them, they will get an interview. If they apply to a job position where we don't sponsor that, then they get a does not meet requirements email that explains why. So to answer that, we have a strict policy in place on how we handle that.
And
that's a CVS response.
And most companies do have a disclosure, at least they should. They'll have work authorization and what is required. But I think that's a very good question that student asked.
It's very good.
Okay, let's see if we have any more in the chat.
Victor had an interesting, good question. If I can take that one, he asked.
Sure, go ahead.
Tell me about how do you answer the question? Tell me about your work experience when you don't have any work experience. That's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. But my answer is you do have work experience. If y'all are in college, then you have projects you've worked on, you have group projects, individual projects, different subject areas. If you've done any on-campus work, if you've had like a part-time job on campus, or if you've done any volunteering, or even if you haven't done that and all you just have your schoolwork, that's enough. So frame those things into experiences. And things that you've learned. Maybe you did a project that's relevant to the work for the position you're applying for. So just look to your school work and frame that in some experiences that are relevant to the job.
And I would also like to add that make sure you highlight that on your resume, which brings me to a plug here for the Career Advancement Center. Make sure that you are in communication with your career advisor. If you're in the Robinson College of Business, they are here to help. They can give you more information about VMOC in regards to going over your resume. If you're applying for an internship, or if you're a first semester senior or second semester senior, you want to at least get ahead of the curve to review your resume to make sure that you are interview ready, to make sure that your resume tells a story so you can be prepared. And your resume is like your script. It's like your life story on your experiences. Be able to talk about it. Let it be able to eloquently flow. I remember a few years back, I was interviewing with an airline, which I did happen to get the job, but he asked me a question on my interview, and I have a background in HR. Guys, I was like stumped. I was like, hold on, wait a minute. And I had to look down at my resume. I was so flabbergasted because that's not me, because I know not to do that, but I was so thrown off, and I was like, wait a minute. And so he's like, caught me. He said, so you were at this place at the same time you were at that place? So know your history. No, don't let it come off as being canned or scripted. I like what Charity says, very conversational. Know who you are, know your whole background on your resume, and be able to speak to that in a conversational tone when you're talking about your experiences, and highlight some of those things. Oh, I saved the department 20% on pencils or widgets or whatever. It's not just scripted and responsibilities, but be able to add value on how you save something for the company or either employee of the month or whatever. But you definitely want to highlight some of your accomplishments with every job and not just a list of duties and responsibilities. So let's see. And so in the chat, we did put information on VMOC, so make sure you look at that as well. So we're going to be coming to a close. So in closing, I would just like for the panel to give us a few tips on virtual interviews or either face-to-face interviews. And I'll start off with Debbie.
Okay. I think the final tip I can give is probably come prepared with a big, long list of questions you would like to ask, because half of them will be answered in the interview. And then when you get to the end and they say, do you have any questions for me? It's good to have a couple that haven't already been answered. And you don't have to start from scratch. There's plenty of templates online, some basic questions you could ask pretty much any interviewer. But it's always good to have a list. A big list going into the interview. And some about the company itself is always good to do some research on the company.
Great, thank you. Marcella.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what Debbie said. I think it's really important to come in with questions. Like I mentioned before, I like to tell all my candidates, you're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing you. So make sure that you have questions that are going to help you make the best decision for yourself. What's going to make you choose one organization over another if you were to get two offers? What are 2 to 3 decision factors that are going to make that impact for you? So think of questions that you can ask the interviewer that are going to make you feel confident in you coming into that organization as well. That could be anything about the responsibilities of the role, the environment, the atmosphere, opportunities for growth. So come in with those questions that are going to help you make the best decision for yourself. And like Charity and Debbie said, do your research. I don't want to hear about what we do because I know about what we do. I want to see that you are passionate about what we do, that you are excited, and that you are ready to contribute and jump on the team as well. So do your research, have your questions ready that are going to make you make the best decision for yourself coming into a new organization.
Can I do a quick follow-up, Marcella?
Yes, of
And
course.
asking your questions, since we are in a virtual and pandemic environment, should the candidate ask if they have the ability to remote work?
Absolutely. If that's going to be a defining factor for you, absolutely ask that question, because the last thing you want to do is waste your own time and get to the final stage only to find out that an organization is expecting you to come in 5 days a week and that's not what you're looking for. Be as transparent as possible in what you're looking for, and they'll be as transparent as possible as well. And so you have every right to ask that question and make that decision. A lot of people want to be able to come into the office, a lot of people don't. So I think that's absolutely a fair question, especially the landscape that we're looking at right now.
Okay, thanks, Marcella. And Charity, closing us out.
I'm going to go really basic at first because this is something I'm seeing a lot of, is when we schedule an interview with you, and for me, I send a template confirming the interview, and then I send a WebEx invite. 30% of my interviews are no-shows. I follow up with them and they forgot. That is always their response. I forgot. That is one of my biggest tips for you. Number one is, if you schedule an interview, read the email, accept the calendar, or put it in your calendar to remind you. Second to that, show up on the interview on time. If you get on 5 to 6 minutes late, you just lost 5 to 6 minutes, because typically we do interviews back to back. So if you get on, and always be in a very quiet space. And if the interview's 30 minutes, kind of block off 45 minutes to an hour, because it may go over, especially if it's a really engaging interview. So that is some really basic tips that I'm running into a lot of, and they'll say, can I reschedule? Honestly, at that point, I move on to the next candidate. We have a system at StarSource, and we have a system called StarSource at CVS, and to put it very transparent, we type notes in there. This person was a no-show, and it's on your profile. Any recruiter can see it for the rest of that. It's called a blacklist, basically. So I can honestly tell you, show up for an interview, or if I have individuals get COVID, they get sick, tell me. We'll reschedule. Make sure you're proactive if anything comes up. That's my big one that I really want to hit on, because I'm seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of that across the company. And then just stay focused and visibly engaged through the interview. Mm-hmm. And remember to always be responsive. And I always, like what we're all saying, is do your research, really come and know your research, and really research the culture of the company and the values of the company, and make sure they align with your values.
That is definitely great advice. In Charity, you mentioned something about the student or the candidate saying that I forgot. They did not put it on their phone. They did not connect it to Outlook or whatever. And also, guys, I would also like to remind you, if you know that you have been sourcing for a job and putting in several applications, set your response to either your phone messages or whatever, kind of clean up that, so when they call back, they're not getting like a crazy voicemail on your phone. You know, there needs to be a separation. Make sure your email is maybe just first name, last name at gmail.com or what have you. But just know that if you are out there looking for a job, they should not hear Future playing in the background as far as your voicemail, or whoever is the latest person, Young Blue or whoever, that's the latest person out there, that when they call back, they should not hear that playing on your voicemail. Marcella.
That's actually reminded me of something that I did want to mention, is that it's totally okay to interview with a bunch of different organizations, but if you're interviewing with various organizations, make sure that you know which role you're coming in to interview for. Have that organized, have little, I get, like I said, I'm such a huge advocate for a cheat sheet. And so if you need to have a little piece of paper that's like, this is the role I'm interviewing for at this organization, and a little bit of the job description, et cetera, yeah, know in which role you're going to interview for. We get it a lot if you're interviewing in a bunch of different places. So just make sure you're staying organized and on top of that.
Okay, I have one quick last question for anyone that want to take it on the panel. How many jobs can you apply at the same company if you see there are several roles if you're interested in that you could be a fit for? Is this kind of like a taboo? Because I was a recruiter and we see where one particular person applied for 6 roles. What's your feedback on that? Marcella, Charity, Debbie?
I can tell you at CVS in our system, we have in the recruiting system we use, it can tell us how many other positions they've applied for. So if another recruiter has already reached out to that person, then that ball's in their court. And we wait for them to make a decision, and then it comes over. So we're not piling that candidate up with different interviews. Mm-hmm. Typically, I'll say you applied for this position, but I see that this recruiter such and such has reached out to you. We'll see how that interview goes. If you would like to move forward with me, please let that recruiter know. So we're not looking for competition within the company. We're not competitive against each other trying to get a candidate. We work together.
Okay, great. Guys, it has been such a great pleasure speaking with all of you today. And in closing, Charity, Debbie, and Marcella, if you have any open opportunities, websites that you would like to share with the students in the chat, I'll stay on for an additional 5 minutes. If you guys want to put your LinkedIn information out there to link in with the students, any additional contact information you would like to provide to our students, it will be much appreciated. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. And students, continue to check Handshake for opportunities, and also Expo that's coming up for tomorrow. Make sure you get registered and make sure you are completely registered, and just check Handshake and your email for different things that we have coming up on the horizon at Robinson. Thank you so much, guys. And as you go into the weekend, be safe and be blessed.